Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic video. This is a show on a movie that I've been wanting to actually get to for a long time. I've mentioned to I've mentioned it in a couple other previous videos that I feel like I don't do enough coverage of sci-fi movies. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. Well, horror and science fiction are my favorite two genres, which I've mentioned. And I just realized like a couple weeks ago, I feel like I don't. Most of the films that I cover on here are on this channel are horror based, horror films. But and I do have a lot of science fiction movies, but I just feel like I don't have enough. So I've been making it a little bit of a point to be kind of mindful of that and get to some reviews and some talks about sci-fi movies that I really love. I did a big show on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is one of my all-time favorites. So today's show is on Minority Report, which was also directed by Steven Spielberg, who also directed Close Encounters. I love this movie to death. This is one of my favorite Steven Spielberg movies, starring Tom Cruise. This Blu-ray edition is really, really great. I have a few different. I have about I have like two versions of this film on DVD, and I have it actually have it on VHS. And I was always for a while I was seeking out to try to buy this on Blu-ray, but I couldn't find it, and I found this last year. I got this at Goodwill in Rockland. Really great price. I got it for $7, but it's a two-disc set. There's hours and hours. There's probably about 5 hours of special features on here, and the transfer from the DVD or the film to the Blu-ray format is spectacular. Like this movie, just alone with the effects is amazing. Like it's truly an immersive experience. It's also the music was also composed by John Williams, who also did Close Encounters. Spielberg and John Williams, the iconic composer, have worked together on very tons of movies together, and this is one of his best scores. It's very dark, it's very sinister. This whole movie, I feel, and it's based on a Philip K. Dick story, but to me, it really encapsulates the kind of the definition of a dystopian society. The whole centerpiece of this is this law enforcement agency that can basically arrest people. They're called the pre-crime organization, and they through these oracles who have these psychic abilities, they're able to predict crimes before they happen. So the police basically make these arrests before these crimes happen, especially with the murder rate. And this movie is such a great dystopian movie because the society itself has reached this place of where crime is incredibly low. People are swept up by all this like propaganda, and on the surface, the society or the world is doing very well, but underneath there's all this darkness, and there's a sense of extreme isolation, and that something is going wrong, and that's kind of the heart of this story. Tom Cruise is amazing in this film. He's notorious for doing a lot of his own stunt work. This was also one of the first film debuts for Colin Farrell. He essentially plays this FBI CIA agent who is actually kind of the villain of the film. He's great. He's great. It was the first movie that I think I've seen with Colin Farrell, who's gone on to become a huge Hollywood actor. But I believe that this might have been his first movie, and he's terrific in it. It's a very intense movie. It's very dark. It's one of the darkest movies that I think Steven Spielberg has ever done, and it really deals with all kinds of things. Where I feel, well, just in general, Philip K. Philip K. Dick's work really always does a great job of like holding a mirror to society. You know, where he tackles the dystopian kinds of universes, and this idea of idealism becoming blind, and then it overtakes a society, and that everybody is essentially controlled by the government. There's no room for the individual anymore. But underneath, there is some kind of emergence of some kind of uprising, of where there is a fraction of that society that is questioning what is really happening and what is going on. And uh, it just captures those themes so well. I think one of the most startling things about this film is, obviously, I think where we are as a society, say with technology, there's this sense that people are closer than ever. But I always feel, well, I think people are a little bit more disconnected than they've ever been. And it also looks at, say for instance, our governments, the governments that we have, the politicians that we vote for. They often, and what we've seen over the last, you know, 20 years, the emergence of fascism, and also the emergence of corporate power, corporations influencing the governments with, through massive payments. And there's like a corporatization of the government. All of those things, I feel like, those are some of the core themes and ideas that Philip K. Dick was always exploring in his work. And the other thing that I feel is like straight out of the headlines now is the idea of the true crime unit that's actually portrayed in this film. That's headed by Tom Cruise, who's like the top leader of this agency. Is the idea or the emergence of, well, it takes on a lot with the military industrial complex, but also the emergence of where we've seen the almost this emergence of like paramilitary meets the law enforcement, of where now they're all of the technology has grown exponentially, and the police are heavily militarized. I mean, we saw that in the riots that happened, during the pandemic. We've seen that, in the age of all of the protests that we've lived through, and it's very startling. And again, these were themes that Philip K. Dick was talking about, 40, 50 years ago, and to see some of these things now actually happening and actually happen is pretty frightening, but it's very real. So I've always felt really drawn to Stephen to this film and Philip K. Dick as a whole, because there's so many ideas and themes in his work that we now see through technology and where we are as a society. And it's funny because when I first saw Minority Report, I remember seeing it in the theater, and I don't know what it was. I really thought I did enjoy it. I thought it was and a really great like action spectacle. But I don't know. I wasn't really invested in it. And it wasn't until years later that I saw it. About 6 or 7 years later, I rented it again on DVD, and I really enjoyed this movie. And I was like, what? And every time I've seen it since, I have really gotten into this movie. And it's one of my favorite kind of more modern sci-fi classics. Definitely one of my favorite Spielberg movies. It's and it's one of his darkest movies. It's a terrific movie. The transfer of this film on Blu-ray is spectacular. Talk about a fully immersive experience. This is one of the greats. Truly one of the best. And I think it's one of the best roles that Tom Cruise has had in his career. And I think it's possibly the best role that he's had as an actor when he's collaborated with Spielberg because they have worked together for on quite a few movies together. And it's also, I think, John Williams, who was the composer. I think it's one of his best scores. It's a really ominous, it's a very dark piece of work. Just an awesome movie. Max von Sydow is in this. This was also the debut of Colin Farrell, who's gone on to become a really huge Hollywood star. Tremendous movie, and I think that this is, you know, a very enjoyable but very intense experience. So if you haven't seen this movie, which I'm sure most people have seen this movie, but this movie has really grown on me over the years. Every time I watch it, I enjoy it more and more. And again, with Philip K. Dick, all of his, a lot of his themes and ideas kind of coming to fruition in our society. Another classic story of his is obviously the Blade Runner franchise, and which were based on his work. A lot of those societal things, the emergence of corporate power, the the influence of corporations on government, and vice versa, and how they've like seemingly become the same kind of empire. And there's a sense of hopelessness, a sense of isolation. All of those great themes are just very important things to think about. For us being hopefully being individuals, and how those things affect us socially and politically. So yeah, one of the greatest, to me, those are the greatest aspects of Philip K. Dick, his work and these films. And I think that this is one of the best, like more or less book adaptations that has ever been made. So yeah, I highly recommend it, especially if you can track down this really awesome edition of it. It comes with a bonus disc, all kinds of wonderful special features. Just a spectacular movie. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again for your support, and we will see you next time. Peace.